Marquise, me, Candace, Miranda, Kaylee, Grant, you have the floor.
I'm assuming you've all heard the story of Robin Hood. It's a story about a man who ends up stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. Almost everyone benefits from the story because the social elite maintain much of their wealth while the poor end up gaining more than enough to survive. This shows that sometimes there's a moral code that needs to be followed by humanity that sometimes isn't always shown in the law. And while many people agree about the morals of this story, if you're the sheriff of Nottingham, you're put in an impossible position in the story. And this is exactly where Stephen Greenleaf was put when he is the sheriff of Boston in the pre-revolution and the Revolutionary War. Whether he was a patriot or a loyalist, he was more of a moderate according to the card we received from the old State House. Stephen Greenleaf had a job to do, and whether they were right or wrong in their actions, the Patriots made Stephen Greenleaf's life nearly impossible. My main points for this topic is the conflict of interest that Mr. Greenleaf would have with his brother being a diehard patriot and him being employed to two prominent loyalists in the pre-revolution. My second point is he was not a very effective sheriff, at least in his encounters with the Patriots. And my third point is he was in a lose-lose situation because he was eventually replaced by his brother as the sheriff. Being the brother of a patriot had to be difficult for Stephen because he was pushed towards the loyalist side due to his occupation, but his brother was able to choose his side. This is shown by his brother William being the first to read the Declaration of Independence from the old State House. So while he's employed to Thomas Hutchinson and Francis Bernard, two of the most prominent pre-revolution loyalists. He was also not a very effective sheriff in ending activity that started the revolution and gave the Patriots much of the traction they needed. For example, in 1765, he was ordered to stop a crowd from hanging political effigies on what we know now as the Liberty Tree. This is some of the first propaganda that was actively shown against the British Crown, and he failed to stop it. 2 years later, his authority was brought into question again when he tried to remove squatters from a house that the British soldiers wanted to occupy. And his biggest success for the Loyalists and the Crown was stopping an illegal meeting that was plotting the Boston Tea Party, but as we know, this still happens. So he is not shown as the most effective sheriff because the Boston Tea Party still goes off without a hitch. And further showing how impossible a situation Stephen was put in, we have to talk about his life following the revolution. Once the Revolutionary War ends, his brother, according to Wikitree.com, in 76, replaces him as sheriff, even though he remained in Boston. But if he had become a patriot, he most likely would have been stripped of his position even earlier due to his loyalist employers. And if you're stripped of your job at this time, your social rank falls straight down to nearly the bottom. And your social rank is regarded so much higher at that time, even more than it is now, because even your voting rights are tied to something like property rights, which also establish social rank. But since he chose the path he did, he was removed from office by his own brother and the other patriots. And I imagine they were not very happy that the first Sheriff Greenleaf did not support them during the Revolution. In conclusion, Mr. Greenleaf was not one of the famous patriots that you hear about in the history books, or one of the devout loyalists like his brother William, the one that does end up replacing him. He was someone that was just trying to do his job and was committed to his job, and in doing so was the first obstacle that the Patriots had to get through and do eventually get through before they end up facing the British, which at the time was one of the most prominent militaries of the time. And again, they were also put in an impossible position, but they pulled through.
Marquise, myself, Candace, Miranda, Kaylee. Great job, Grant.